All right, you degenerates, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into that glorious shithole known as Detroit. And no, we ain't talking about those shitty car commercials with robots and smiling families. We're going way back. Digging through the dirt and the grime, peeling back the layers of this rusted-out onion to see what the fuck really makes Detroit tick.
We're going deep on Detroit using this Wikipedia article you gave me.
Yeah, we're talking French fur traders, the Paris of the West, the rise and fall of the goddamn auto industry, and whatever the hell is going on in that city right now. So buckle up, buttercups. This is going to be a bumpy ride.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get this show on the road.
Okay, so first things first. Detroit. Not exactly known for its sparkling reputation, right?
Yeah.
But before we get to the whole murder city and abandoned buildings thing, let's rewind the clock a bit. Way back, like powdered wigs and syphilis kind of back. Apparently, Detroit was once this fancy pants French hangout called the Paris of the West. What the fuck is that about?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Back in 1701, this French dude, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac, what a name, right, decided to set up shop right on the Detroit River. It was all about the fur trade back then. Beavers, foxes, you name it. They were skinning anything that moved and shipping those pelts back to Europe.
So Detroit started as a French fur trapping outpost. Kind of like a 18th century version of a goddamn Bass Pro Shop.
Something like that. But things changed in the late 1800s. Detroit started getting all gussied up. They built these grand boulevards, installed electric lights. Hell, even Thomas Edison himself was involved in wiring up the city. It was a time of prosperity. And Detroit was attracting artists, entrepreneurs, all sorts of folks looking to make their mark.
Hold up, are you telling me Detroit was actually a happening place back then? Like people were willingly going there, not just getting the hell out.
Believe it or not, yeah. Detroit was booming. They had this thriving cultural scene, theaters, art galleries, the whole 9 yards. And the architecture was pretty impressive, too. Think ornate buildings, elaborate facades, a real sense of grandeur. It's how it earned that Paris of the West nickname. It was all about opulence and sophistication.
Okay, so Detroit had its moment in the sun. But let's cut the crap and get to the good stuff.
Cars.
Detroit is synonymous with cars, right?
Yeah.
Henry Ford, assembly lines, the big three, all that jazz. How the hell did Detroit become the Motor City?
Well, it all started with a guy named Henry Ford. He had this crazy idea to build affordable cars for the masses, not just for the rich folks, but for everyday people. He revolutionized the manufacturing process with his assembly line pumping out Model Ts like nobody's business.
Yeah, Ford was a goddamn visionary, gotta give him that. But wasn't it more than just him? Didn't other car guys set up shop in Detroit too?
Oh, absolutely. The Dodge brothers, Walter Chrysler, the list goes on. They all saw the potential in Detroit, the workforce, the infrastructure, the whole shebang. And it wasn't just cars, either. Detroit was a manufacturing powerhouse. They were making everything from stoves to tanks. The city was booming, drawing in workers from all over the country, all eager for a piece of the American dream. By the 1950s, Detroit's population had exploded to almost 2 million people.
So Detroit was this industrial behemoth churning out cars and all sorts of other shit. Sounds like the city was on fire. But wait a minute, before we get all misty-eyed about Detroit's glory days, wasn't there some shady shit going on too? Like, wasn't it a pretty segregated city?
Yeah, sadly, racial tensions were a major issue in Detroit. Black workers often faced discrimination, were relegated to the lowest paying jobs, and were shut out of many neighborhoods.
So while white folks were living the high life, black folks are getting the short end of the stick. That's fucked up.
It definitely wasn't a level playing field. And this simmering tension eventually boiled over. In the summer of 1967, with the Detroit riots, 5 days of violence, looting, and arson. It was a devastating blow to the city, both physically and psychologically.
Yeah, the Detroit riots, that's some heavy shit. Not exactly the image they show in those car commercials, huh?
No, not exactly. The riots exposed the deep racial divisions in Detroit, and they left a scar on the city. That took decades to heal. And they also mark a turning point in Detroit's history. Things were about to get a whole lot worse.
All right, we've talked about the good times, the bad times, and the really fucking ugly times. But hold your horses, folks. We're just getting started. Next up, we're diving into the shitstorm that was Detroit's downfall. We're talking economic collapse, urban decay, and the whole murder city reputation.
Should be a fascinating, albeit depressing look, and how a once thriving city went to hell in a handbasket.
Stay tuned, you magnificent bastards. We'll be right back.
All right, so we left off with Detroit, teetering on the edge of a massive shitstorm. The riots in '67 were a wake-up call. But the city was already starting to crumble.
Yeah.
The auto industry, the very heart of Detroit, was starting to sputter.
Yeah, the party was winding down.
Yeah.
and the hangover was about to hit Detroit, like a ton of bricks. What the hell happened? Did those foreign car companies finally figure out how to build a decent car?
It's more complicated than that. But yeah, foreign competition played a huge role. Japanese car makers, especially, started flooding the market with fuel-efficient, reliable cars. American car companies were slow to adapt, and they paid the price.
So Detroit's auto industry got its ass kicked. But how did that translate into the whole city going to shit?
Think about it. The auto industry was Detroit's lifeblood. It employed hundreds of thousands of people, directly and indirectly. When the factories started closing down, jobs disappeared, and people started bailing out. White flight had already started after the riots, and now it accelerated. The city's tax base shrunk, neighborhoods emptied out, and crime skyrocketed. It was a domino effect, and it was brutal.
So Detroit became a ghost town. All those beautiful buildings,
Yeah.
all that history, just left to rot.
Not a complete ghost town, but it was pretty damn bleak. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned, factories stood empty, and crime became rampant. By the 2000s, Detroit had become a symbol of urban decay, a cautionary tale of what happens when a city loses its economic engine.
Yeah, that's some depressing shit. But hold on, I've heard whispers, rumors of a Detroit comeback. Is that just bullshit? Or is there something actually happening in that wasteland?
It's a mixed bag, honestly. There are definitely some signs of life, especially in downtown and midtown. You've got tech startups, artists, young entrepreneurs moving in, trying to revitalize the city. There's a certain energy, a gritty determination. That's pretty inspiring.
So it's not all doom and gloom. People are actually choosing to live in Detroit. Are they fucking insane?
Maybe a little, but there's something about Detroit that draws people in. It's a city with a rich history, a unique culture, and a certain rawness that you don't find in a lot of other places. And let's be real, it's cheap as hell to live there. You can get a lot of space for your money, which is a huge draw for artists and entrepreneurs.
Okay, so there's some hope for Detroit, but let's not sugarcoat it. The city still has a ton of problems, right? Poverty, crime, abandoned buildings. It's not exactly paradise.
You're not wrong. The challenges are huge and deep-rooted. The city is still struggling to provide basic services to its residents. There's a lack of jobs, a failing education system, and a whole lot of poverty. It's going to take a lot more than a few hipsters brewing craft beer to fix all that.
Yeah. Turning Detroit around is a hell of a task. But you know what? I got to give it to those Detroiters. They're a tough bunch. They've been through some shit. But they haven't given up.
That's for sure. Detroiters have a certain grit, a resilience, that you don't find everywhere. They're proud of their city, even with all its flaws.
Speaking of pride, let's talk about something Detroit has in spades. Music. Holy shit, this city has a musical legacy. That's off the charts. Motown, techno, jazz, punk rock. It's like a goddamn musical melting pot.
Detroit's musical DNA is incredible. Motown, of course, is legendary. Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, the Supremes, the Temptations, that sound defined a generation. And then you've got techno, born and bred in Detroit. Guys like Juan Atkins, Derek May, Kevin Saunderson. They took the sounds of the factories, the rhythm of the machines, and turned it into music. It was futuristic, raw, and totally unique.
And we can't forget about jazz, right? Detroit was a major hub for jazz in the mid-20th century. And then there's the whole punk rock scene, the MC5, the Stooges. These bands were raw, angry, and full of energy. They were the voice of a city that was pissed off and ready to explode.
It's amazing how Detroit has produced such a diverse range of music. From soulful Motown to the industrial sounds of techno, it speaks to the city's creative spirit, its ability to find beauty and expression, even in the midst of hardship.
All right, let's shift gears for a minute. We've talked about the music, the people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what about the city itself? The buildings, the architecture, the physical landscape of Detroit.
Detroit's architecture is fascinating. It's like a time capsule, reflecting the city's boom and bust cycles. You've got these grand Art Deco skyscrapers, ornate theaters, and then you've got block after block of abandoned buildings, crumbling factories, and empty lots. It's a stark reminder of the city's lost glory.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of those abandoned buildings. It's eerie, but there's also a certain beauty to it, you know, like a post-apocalyptic landscape, but with a touch of elegance.
There's definitely a certain aesthetic to it, and some of those buildings are true architectural gems. The Fox Theater, for instance, is this massive, over-the-top movie palace from the 1920s. It's like stepping back in time.
And what about the Guardian building? That thing looks like a goddamn spaceship landed in downtown Detroit.
Absolutely. It's this Art Deco masterpiece with all these intricate details and vibrant colors. And then you've got the Detroit Institute of Arts, the DIA. It's one of the top art museums in the country. with a world-class collection spanning centuries. It's amazing to think that a city that's gone through so much still has these incredible cultural institutions.
All right, so Detroit has its fair share of architectural wonders, even if some of them are a bit worse for wear. But let's be real, the city is still a mess. What's the future hold for Detroit? Is it destined to become a giant parking lot?
Yeah.
Or is there a chance for a real comeback?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The future of Detroit is uncertain. There are signs of hope, but the challenges are immense. It's going to take a massive effort from both the public and private sectors to really turn things around.
It's going to be a long road.
Yeah.
But you know what? I wouldn't count Detroit out just yet. This city has a way of surprising people.
Agreed. Detroit has a history of reinvention, of rising from the ashes. It's a city that's been knocked down countless times, but always seems to find a way to get back up.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. From French fur traders to the rise and fall of the auto industry, from Motown to techno, from urban decay to glimmers of hope.
It's a complex and fascinating story, full of contradictions, triumphs, and tragedies. Detroit is a microcosm of America itself, a reflection of our hopes, our dreams, and our struggles.
Well said, Professor. But we're not done yet. We've got one more part to this Detroit saga.
We'll delve deeper into the challenges and opportunities facing Detroit today.
Stay tuned, you beautiful degenerates.
All right, you beautiful degenerates, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're knee-deep in this Detroit shitstorm, and let me tell you, the water's getting pretty murky. We've talked about the city's epic rise and fall, its musical legacy, and the architectural gems that are somehow still standing. But let's be real. The question on everyone's mind is, can Detroit actually pull itself out of this hole? Or is it destined to be another cautionary tale of American urban decay?
It's the million-dollar question. And there's no easy answer. Detroit is at a crossroads, facing some serious challenges, but also some intriguing opportunities. All right, Professor, lay it on us. What's the prognosis? Is Detroit going to flatline? Or is there a chance for a goddamn resurrection?
Well, let's start with the bad news. Detroit is still grappling with a whole host of problems. Poverty is rampant, unemployment is high, and crime continues to be a major issue. The city's infrastructure is crumbling, schools are struggling, and many neighborhoods are still blighted by abandoned buildings and vacant lots.
So basically, Detroit's a hot mess.
Yeah.
But what about those glimmers of hope we talked about? Those hipsters brewing craft beer in abandoned factories? Those tech startups popping up downtown? Is that all just a bunch of hype? Or is there some substance to it?
There's definitely some real progress happening, particularly in downtown and midtown. These areas have seen an influx of new businesses and residents, attracted by the city's low cost of living and its unique, gritty vibe. There's a burgeoning tech scene with companies like Quicken Loans and StockX setting up shop, and the arts and culture scene is thriving, with new galleries, music venues, and restaurants popping up all the time.
So there's some life in the old girl yet. But let's be real. It's going to take more than a few craft breweries and art galleries to fix Detroit. What about the bigger issues? The poverty, the crime, the failing schools? How the hell do you tackle those problems?
Those are the tough questions. And there's no magic bullet. It's going to require a multi-pronged approach, involving investment in education, job training, infrastructure, and social services. It's going to require collaboration between the government, the private sector, and community organizations. And most importantly, it's going to require the continued resilience and determination of the people of Detroit.
Yeah, the Detroiters. They've been through some shit. But they haven't given up. There's a certain toughness, a pride in that city. That's pretty damn inspiring.
Absolutely. Detroiters have a deep connection to their city. And they're not afraid of hard work. They've seen the worst of times. But they're still fighting for a better future.
All right, Professor, let's wrap this up. What's the final verdict on Detroit? Is it a city on the rise or a city in decline?
It's both, honestly. Detroit is a city of contradictions, a place where hope and despair exist side by side. It's a city that's been through hell and back. But it's still standing. The future is uncertain. But one thing's for sure, Detroit's story is far from over.
Well said, Professor. Detroit, a city of contradictions, a city of resilience, a city that refuses to die. It's a goddamn roller coaster ride of a story. And I, for one, am fascinated to see where it goes from here. To all you beautiful degenerates out there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of the Motor City. Check out the show notes for links to all the info we talked about today. If you want to get nerdy on this shit, until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and don't take any bullshit from anyone. Peace out.